Welcome back to another video. In this one, we're hopping in the boat with Brad Hawthorne. He's gonna share a bunch of really good tips for catching walleyes on spinner rigs. And the first topic that he's gonna touch on is what are the ideal conditions for when he's gonna be busting out the blades.
When and where for spinners every year? I get that question a lot, and it's usually when I start seeing those bugs. And where I start seeing them is not in the sky, it's on my screen. And a lot of times we will use my down viewing and my Mega Live to verify that those are bugs. Yes, that does work. So if you're unsure, use your forward facing sonar to verify that those are bugs. And I see these clouds out there. When the bugs first start to hatch, you're not gonna see them for 3 or 4 days, especially on larger bodies of water, because those bugs quite simply get consumed. A lot of those, edibles is what they are. They're edible little nuggets underneath the water that the walleyes see those and they just start picking away. So then the bug hatches go into full effect where you start seeing them and they see them under lights and those things. You'll see it, Erie has major hatches, Leech does, Mille Lacs does, all the major lakes do. So right around the bug hatches, when you start seeing them pop out of the mud and start coming to the surface, that's when I start pulling spinners. Now, Mille Lacs is one of those bodies of water where spinners work all the way through fall. Once spinners start, you can catch fish on spinners almost all the way until freeze up. So, and then you get up to areas like Grand Rapids and those areas, the same thing applies up there. Spinners, guys will fish spinners up there all year long. So that's when I use that benchmark, is when the bugs start to hatch. If you had to put a water temperature on it, which I don't like to do because bodies of water are deeper and shallower and everyone has a different median temp. But if I had to say that 68 to 72 degree water temp, right there is usually the start of it. Right when you start to get over that hill, when the water is pretty much starting to get pretty consistent. So another method to use on when to start using spinners is on big bodies of water like Leech, Mille Lacs, Winnie, is when you get that right up around 70, 72, 73 degrees, and then you get a big blow and that turns and rotates the water in the whole system. That'll bring up the core temperature of the lake, and that right there is a sure set way to figure out when to start pulling spinners.
Next up, Brad is gonna share a strategy that he's been using to catch more walleyes on spinners, and it's a little bit different, kind of a little bit of a left turn from your traditional spinner rigging tactic.
So going slow, what I should have said was going so slow that you can actually stall your spinner rigs, which has never been possible before. And you can't do it with live bait unless you really blow them up with a worm blower. But with the eye candy plastics, what this allowed us to do, what we found out early last year during prototyping, was I was turning on fish 90 degrees and pulling in that direction, and I was catching fish on the stall, which I had never done before. You never really stalled your spinners before because they get full of mud, full of weeds, snagged, what have you. You just didn't do it. And what we found out was we started getting bit on the stall, and it turned into a thing. Yeah, it turned into a thing where we're actually stalling our spinner rigs now, and you can watch them on Mega Live. You'll neutral up or pop your power off on your motor and stall your baits, and you watch the fish come up, bang, and they eat them. So, and that's possible because number one, butterfly blades, they spin at 1/4 mile an hour, okay? Eye candy floats, okay? So with those two things, you got a blade that's moving all the way down to 1/4 mile an hour, and then you got the eye candy that'll hold it up on a stall, or at least if there's even a lot of beads on there, it'll fall really, really slowly, but it will not go on the bottom and foul the lure or get snagged. And that is what I mean by going super slow and turning. Really allowed us with spinner rigs to really hit on all cylinders for once in our lifetime, to be able to stall spinner rigs and infinitely almost pull them as fast as crankbaits in some instances, 1.4, 1.5, 1.6 on different bodies of water. So if you haven't brushed up your spinner rigging skills lately, I would say it's time to get on it, because with all the advancements in technology in the industry today, people, if you're not in on the spinner revolution right now, and if you're not staying on top of how guys are fishing them nowadays, get on it, because there's a lot of fish being caught and there's a lot of people being left in the dust.
Now, anytime that you're trolling, it doesn't matter if it's spinner rigs or crankbaits or anything in between, one of the biggest keys to having success is changing things up, experimenting, making modifications, and now Brad is gonna talk about a couple modifications that he uses to catch more fish on spinners.
Mods I do to my spinner rigs, either everyday guide life or just out there fishing. So, eye candy crawlers, you see it's got a paddle tail on there. Now that creates action. One mod I will do is just snip that off right there. And then you get a traditional worm right on there. So that is one mod that I'll do. The other mod that I do on my spinner rigs is I don't know, especially on Mille Lacs and Leech or wherever you're fishing, I could be on different types of substrates throughout the day. So I keep my quick change clevis right there. These you can get at Northland. And then I also have a snap there. And that allows me to run either a slick stick, I can snap on a bell sinker, a Northland reed runner. I can use almost all available weight options with this. A snap, a quick change clevis, and right there, that is my #1 spinner rig tip right there. Keep your rods universal to be able to change from mud to rock to sand to weeds, all in maybe 2-3 minutes of changing, you know, I can change out 4 rods in my boat in less than 5 minutes. So that is why I rig like that. It's my #1 tip.
Now, it's no doubt that a lot of guys like to use braided line as their main line that they have spooled up on the reel when they're pulling spinners. But one thing that I've noticed when I've been out fishing with Brad is he actually likes to use fluorocarbon as his main line. So I asked him to explain why he does that for this video.
Line choice for spinner rigs, I'm a big proponent of fluorocarbon. So what we've been doing for years now is we're able to watch fish attitude. And what I'm seeing is, if you can get away with it, I'm using longer leader lines, I'm using all fluorocarbon leaders, I'm not using a lot of mono anymore, to be honest with you. And the reason I use fluorocarbon on my spinner rigs is just because when you come through, the angle of your line, I don't want a bunch of braid going through the fish, especially on a clear body of water like Mille Lacs. Now, if you go to Lake of the Woods, you can get away with braid. So a lot of it's water quality, a lot of it's sensitivity, but I really err on the side of caution with, I'd rather use a really low stretch fluorocarbon line that's gonna perform in all situations very well, versus do one thing really well and then not in another situation. So that's why. So if I'm gonna go to Lake of the Woods or a really dark body of water, absolutely, I'm gonna throw on some hammer braid or something like that. But for 80%, 90% of my deep spinner fishing, I'm using 8 to 12 pound fluorocarbon.
Well, that's about all we got for you in this video. If we wanted to cover everything that you needed to know to catch walleyes on spinner rigs, this would be like a 2-hour video. So those are just a handful of tips that'll hopefully help you put a few more fish in the boat. If you enjoyed this video and you learned something, make sure to hit that little red subscribe button down below, because we have a lot more awesome content coming in the future. And until then, we will see you in the next one.